Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, Hugh Freeze, the Auburn Tigers, by far one of the most fascinating college football teams going into 2025. And what I mean by fascinating college football team is the range of outcomes for Auburn is extremely wide. Like if you told me Hugh Freeze goes 5-7 and is not coaching in 2026, I don't know if there'd be a lot of Auburn fans that are all that surprised. But if you told me they go 10-2 and make the college football playoffs, I'm not sure if I'd be that surprised either. I mean, the ceiling for Auburn as a football team in 2025 is much higher than people give them credit for because of what we've seen from them the last 2 years under Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze has acquired a team from a talent level perspective. What you see on paper early March, and it probably only gets better after that spring transfer portal window. Hugh Freeze put together a team that can bang with anybody in the SEC. Now, why are we so confident in the ceiling of Auburn? That's what we want to get into over the next couple of minutes before we get into it, as always. To the Auburn fans, there might be some Auburn fans who are just yanking at our collars, Dale, and say, easy with the expectations. I would love to hear how the Auburn fans are kind of feeling in terms of expectations of this football team going into 2025. The amount of support many of y'all shown for the last 2 years as Hugh Freeze has taken over this thing, as we've covered the transfer portal commitments, the high school recruiting commitments. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, you kind of texted me something that I think makes a lot of sense, and that you're kind of looking for give me the reasons to buy stock in Jackson Arnold, because you look at this offense, specifically just this offense, and I've been very vocal that the defense could be very good in 2025. But simply on the offense, still, if you told me Jackson Arnold plays like a five-star quarterback, and then I look at everything around him, I'm saying this is a 10-2 football team, a team that can compete in the college football playoffs. And you said, all right, how do we get Jackson Arnold to play like that in 2025? One of the things that you mentioned was, hey, Jackson Arnold getting back to the RPO game. Something that, I mean, with him and Jeff Lebby when he was a true freshman at Oklahoma it's kind of how he was brought up as a quarterback his freshman year at Oklahoma. Now they went away from that a little bit when Seth Littrell took over that offense in 2024. That offense was a disaster, not only from a schematic standpoint, but from a talent standpoint as well. What do you think about Jackson Arnold returning to a little bit more of an RPO offense? Could you see Jackson Arnold maybe get just a little bit more comfortable in this Auburn offense in 2025?
And can he run it more comfortably than Peyton Thorne? That's kind of what I'm
Yeah,
thinking. Because you look at where Peyton Thorne came from to where he went with Auburn, like that's such a different offense. I mean, what they were doing at Michigan State was very predicated on Kenneth Walker being a good running back and working play action off of it. That's just not what Auburn's going to do under Hugh Freeze. I mean, it is a very much Jeff Lebby RPO like system that, again, the best football we've seen from Jackson Arnold was probably his true freshman bowl game
agreed.
against Arizona, where he definitely turned the ball over. He took some chances he probably shouldn't have taken. But in terms of seeing a decisive, rhythmic passing attack, like that's the best we ever saw from I'd say Jackson Arnold. So I look like, can Hugh Freeze translate some of those Jeff Lebby concepts that, again, they run a similar kind of scheme, a similar type of game? Can that translate into Jackson Arnold? And he runs that in a more comfortable way, because Peyton Thorne, he was never confident doing it. He wasn't a decisive quarterback at Auburn. He did some things like backing up in the pocket, just like, again, those things that quarterbacks who aren't particularly comfortable, they kind of feel like they do, and then turning the ball over. Now, the one thing you got to look for is Jackson Arnold's turned the ball over pretty much every time we've seen him. Hugh Freeze's quarterbacks in general have turned the ball over a lot throughout the course of his career.
Okay.
So that will be the one thing to really key in on is okay, how can you get the best out of Arnold and what you've seen from him under the Lebby scheme, but also hopefully limit the turnovers and the chances they take.
You said something that I think is really meaningful, and that is how can we get Jackson Arnold back confident with this Auburn offense? And it might just have to do with the personnel around him, Dill. I mean, you go back to when we saw Jackson Arnold play in that bowl game for Oklahoma in 2023 against Arizona as a true freshman. That was a confident quarterback. It was a true freshman quarterback that was making some mistakes, but it was a confident gunslinging quarterback. And then you watch the film from the 2024 year, and it was he was seeing ghosts out there. Now, you can put some of that on Jackson Arnold, but you can also put that on Oklahoma probably having the worst offensive line in the conference. You can also put that on just the whole pass catcher room, pretty much getting hurt. Every wide receiver that he was throwing to in spring and fall camp was not really playing for Oklahoma through the majority of 2024. There are some other reasons to kind of believe in Jackson Arnold becoming that confident quarterback that we saw as a freshman against Arizona in that bowl game. Number two, and I don't know if I totally agree with you here, but you kind of put this in here, elite run game. That's when you talk about getting a confident quarterback, taking a little pressure off a guy like Jackson Arnold. The best way to do that is with a run game. What do you see with this Auburn offense that gives you? I mean, this is going to shock even a lot of Auburn fans. Like, we're losing Jarquez Hunter. How can you get up here and tell us our run game is going to be elite? What do you see from this Auburn offense that gives you confidence that that this Auburn offense can run the football effectively?
Two things, and it definitely starts up front. Like, I think this offensive line, in terms of what they're bringing back, some of the high end talent they add in, I do think they didn't have that true left tackle. It felt like a position they were back and forth with obviously Dylan Wade, who probably isn't a true left tackle, and then Percy Lewis, who was just playing poorly, I thought, for Auburn for the most part. You go out, you kind of grab the guy, if you will, in my opinion, Xavier Chaplin. If you were going to go get one left tackle in this transfer portal cycle, it was probably going to be him. But then you look at the way Connor Lewis coming along. Braden Joyner, I think he's going to find his way onto this field. I think you talk about physicality, being able to move guys off the line of scrimmage. And then Jeremiah Wright, Isaiah Miller, and Mason Murphy have all played a ton of football. So I think you combine really good continuity, which I love with my offensive lines in college football, with being able to like truly get that left tackle, if you will, right? I look at what this offensive line can be. I think it can be really good. And then Jackson Arnold being a bigger part of this run scheme, because he looked really cut. That was when you saw him playing confident and comfortable, was when he was running the ball.
They low-key went to like a wildcat offense at the end of the year. It's like, all right, we can't pass protect. We don't have wide receivers who can make plays on the outside. We're gonna make it a little gritty. And you're right. Jackson Arnold, he's not a Lamar Jackson, but he's a big, thick body that can certainly contribute in the run game. And I'm interested to see how much they try to get him involved in the run game. And I'll say this about Mason Murphy, Dill. I got question marks about Mason Murphy and pass protection. I don't really have any question marks about him in the run game. He can move some bodies off the line of scrimmage. And really, that's the only question I have on this offensive line is, what's your right tackle position look like? Because I look at that left side of the offensive line and say, it's going to be a really darn good unit. And then you look at the running backs, and I'll say this. I don't think you're going to have a Jarquez Hunter. I think Jarquez Hunter is one of the best running backs in the country over the last couple of years, but I don't think the drop-off is going to be as big as some people think. For one, I have Jeremiah Cobb's been my guy since he came out of high school. I like Damari Austin. You're bringing that UConn running back who I don't even know if will be in the two deep, because I think I like Jeremiah Cobb and Austin better, but the running back room is not going to be a liability from a talent standpoint. If you get an offensive line that's better than it was last year, I do think the running game can be a factor for Auburn. And then number three, and this is where it starts. All right, now if you can get the run game going and force defenses to kind of come into the box a little bit, can you push the ball down the field? The question here is not the pass catchers. This might be the best wide receiver room that you see in the country going into 2025. The question is, can Jackson Arnold make it happen vertically? Because you do see sometimes in the Oklahoma film that he had some throws, especially early in the season, that were there and some explosives, and he missed them. Look, I've been watching Jackson Arnold since he's been a sophomore in high school. I know he can make those throws. Can you get Jackson Arnold back into that? It's more of a thing between the years, in my opinion. Can you get him back into that mode where, hey, I'm going to dice some teams up, pushing the ball vertically down the field?
And there's a couple of young quarterbacks I look at, like Nico at Tennessee. Like, he's another young quarterback who missed some really frustrating deep balls that you're like, oh, that was there. You got to be able to hit them. Again, like, he has the arm talent to do it. I look at the wide receivers. I think he's got much better wide receivers, guys who will track the ball better, who will create a lot more separation. So again, like, I'm not out on Jackson Arnold as pass thrower, I should say. And then I look at what they're going to have in this wide receiver room. He's never seen anything like it. That's going to be the big one. Like, if they can be a really explosive passing attack, and Jackson Arnold at least has the arm to pretty much do what you go on to do in terms of attacking down the field, I mean, you get a really dangerous offense.
And I'll say this. I mean, explosive passing attacks, they come in different forms, man. Like, yes, it first starts with pushing the ball vertically down the field, but you also have legitimate difference makers with the football in their hands. Eric Singleton, as good as he is working vertically down the field, his best asset I think that he brings to Auburn is what he does with the football in his hands. Malcolm Simmons as a true freshman, I know you don't love him as much. I'm a huge Malcolm Simmons guy. Dill, it was very clear that Hugh Freeze and the staff loved him. I mean, every chance they got to give the football to him in space, they took it. And so, yes, you have guys, Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Eric Singleton, that can work vertically down the field. You also have those difference makers in space that can make some things happen too. And it kind of goes into the conversation of, hey, can we take a little pressure off Jackson Arnold? Yeah. Little swing pass to Malcolm Simmons that instead of going for 3 yards, goes for 20. It's a way to take some pressure off your quarterback. This is where the conversation gets fun though, because I feel like everybody in look, the conversation of Auburn being a college football playoff team, it starts with Jackson Arnold playing good football, because if you don't get that, you're not going to be a college football playoff team. But what people are just ignoring is still this defense. Hugh Freeze has spent a lot of time building the trenches, specifically on the defensive line. And there's a really real chance that this is one of the better defensive lines that you see in the conference going into 2025. What makes you have so much confidence with this defensive line here?
I think you're just starting to see the defensive lineman I'd expect to see under Hugh Freeze at Auburn. Like when he first got there, you just didn't have guys who you're like, oh yeah, he's going to be an NFL player. This is a really impactful defensive lineman. I look at the way like a Malik Blockton even played as a true freshman.
Dog.
Like you assume he takes a step. I mean, his ability to beat blocks and make plays in the backfield. Keldrick Falk, I mean, he's emerging into like a real monster, I'd say, like played really dominant football. And then you have some guys like Amaris Williams, Jamonte Waller, and even Kieran Crawford, who I thought picked his game up a fair amount. It's going to hinge on one or two of those young guys, Malik Autry, Coleman, Crawford, one or two of them playing at a pretty high level. Then you'll have depth. I think you'll have enough high-end ability to play. That's probably where it hinges, is those true freshmen. How ready can they get early on in their career?
Yeah, it could, because at least for me, the top end talent's there. Keldrick Falk's one of the best defensive linemen in the conference. I know that going into 2025. Amaris Williams has been my guy for the last 24 months. I think he can become that going into year 2. The question is the depth, specifically in the middle of the defensive line. Malik Autry is probably the guy that I look at and say he to me, coming out of high school, is probably the most ready to play. I believe he weighed in at 339 pounds too. So he's certainly got the size, and maybe he's got to shed a little bit of weight to be that guy in 2025. When you have enough, and this is why you see teams like Georgia dominate the line of scrimmage for the past 5 years. When you have enough capable bodies, it's a numbers game. I ain't a numbers guy, but I know a numbers game when I see it. You're going to have some guys step up, and you got 3 legitimate blue chip defensive linemen coming in. Can you get 1 or 2 of them to be ready? And it doesn't need to be like, hey, we need 40 snaps a game from you, but can you give us 15 to 20? And if you do
you just don't want like Malik Blockton and Jamison Travis. Jamison Travis, I thought, really played better than I kind of expected last year. So I think you like what you have with those two guys.
Yeah.
You don't want. I don't know that those two are going to give you great snaps if they need to play 500 in the season, like 500 snaps. Like that's probably too much. If you can give them the proper rest, and again, a Crawford, an Autry, a Coleman, one of those guys can come in and give you what you said, that 15 to 20, and you keep those two top end guys kind of rolling, if you will. I think he'd have a good defensive line.
What got Michigan into trouble sometimes last year, as Michigan fans, like Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, as good of football players as those two were, they were playing a lot of snaps early in the season. And that makes it hard not only to win in the fourth quarter, but it makes it hard to win late in the season as well. Last thing that you put in is the secondary continuity, which I can get with. I mean, this is a secondary where you just add a really high-end cornerback in Strader coming from Miami of Ohio. The rest of these guys have played a lot of football together, are familiar with what DJ Durkin wants to do, and Dill, that matters. We talk about continuity, and it's becoming a more important role in college football, especially on the offensive line and the back end. Texas A&M had a loaded secondary last year from a talent perspective. They got a lot of guys that are going to be playing in the NFL in that secondary unit, but it was a bad unit because it was all new faces. You look at Auburn and say, we know they have the talent level. I mean, a guy like Jay Crawford comes in as a true freshman and balls out. Same with Caleb Harris in the safety position. But now you have the talent, but you also have all these guys coming back, and it's a it's a group filled with continuity. There is reason to believe that Auburn's defense, that was a top 30 unit last year, opposite an offense that flat out stunk for a lot of the season, there's a lot of confidence that it could be an even better unit in 2025 as well.
Because again, I look like they could potentially basically run back their starting five. I mean, again, Ryan Strader's probably going to make his way into the field.
I think he plays. He can play.
But like theoretically, they could basically run their five back.
Yeah.
And again, you look at the emergence, like those 4 or 3 true freshmen last year, Sylvester Smith, Caleb Harris, and Jay Crawford, I thought all like played really well, especially Crawford and Harris. And I know you mentioned that, but like those two really played good football, I thought, for them. So again, I look like how much better I think that unit can be potentially. And it was a good unit last year. That's just where you look like, where can like Auburn really be dominant, like top end ability, or just really, have those type of units. And you probably need 3 or 4 of them on the field that are like real difference makers. I think I look at that secondary. I think they could.
Here's another one. As long as we're on the, sorry, I talked.
No, I'm just saying, like when you have that continuity, if they can take the ball away and make that like kind of stride to like, not just playing really good, but taking the ball away and putting your handprint on the game a little bit more, you have a special group. I think.
While we're at the Auburn hype train, real quick, here's another thing that you didn't mention, but I'd like to mention it. Year 2 with your defensive coordinator. That matters. There's history. Again, there's a long track record of year 2 defensive coordinators where defenses take massive jumps. You're getting that. And Dill, one of the things that stood out is Hugh Freeze in that Auburn program ponied up the money to keep him. What does that tell me? That Hugh Freeze has a lot of confidence with where this defense is going, not only from a personnel standpoint, but from a coaching staff standpoint too. I think that matters. This is going to be such a fun team to watch. And Dill, you talk about the schedule. Last year, Auburn had a very gettable schedule in the month of September and kind of just fumbled the bag, if you will. Like lost games that you probably shouldn't have lost. And then that Auburn season kind of just snowballs into just a kind of a losing season, and you didn't have any confidence to close out games as a program. You got a gettable schedule. Your first 3 games, very gettable. And then you go on the road, I believe, to Norman, Oklahoma, week 4. If you can go win that game, which still is very, very winnable for this Auburn team, Jackson Arnold coming back to Norman, that's a fun storyline. If you win that game and all of a sudden it's like, we know we have a good team and now we know how to win football games and we kind of believe as a program we can win football games, that's probably the biggest thing Hugh Freeze is trying to change right now. He's drastically changed the talent of this roster. It's night and day from when he took over in 2023. Now can you change how this program operates and how this program thinks of itself? We'll see. It's going to be such a fun team. And again, this was a lot of reasons to believe in Auburn. You got plenty of question marks too. We'll talk about those question marks, but the difference between Auburn and a team like Illinois, Dill. There's a lot of people who are buying stock in Illinois. The biggest difference is Illinois is a very solid team top to bottom, but they don't have the ceiling to be at least in my humble opinion, they don't have the ceiling to be a top 10 team. Auburn does. Like if these things work out for Auburn, it can be a top 10 team because that's what I see on paper. We'll close out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.